We're talking with Dr. Legates, who's a climate expert. We're talking about the economy and the impact it has on humans, but also on our lifestyle and really our actual very existence. And this is so broad brush as we're being shoved on us. It's entered every aspect of human society, and a big push in the investment world, something I would have never thought possible when I started investing in 1982, was the impact it would have in the form of ESG investing. Can you describe a little bit about how that impact has come about and what we should do about it?
Well, I mean, ESG is environment, social, and government. And the idea of those three is to control essentially everything you do. Because it's not just what are you doing for the environment, it's particularly you have to be on the environmental playbook. You have to be following the governmental playbook. You have to be doing what is believed to be socially acceptable. And if you're outside that realm, then we start to hammer you, we start to push you to the back, and it becomes more of a problem. So it's really a hammer, if you will, to make people follow along and do what we want them to do.
Well, you know what bothers me about ESG is that Larry Fink and BlackRock, while they'll try and enforce that on American companies, they'll turn and invest in China. What does China do for the environment? Is China good for the climate?
That's the funny thing, is China is building essentially a coal-fired power plant about every week. And they're using them. They're not just building them and letting them sit as they're doing with some of their cities. So the idea is they are becoming much more coal dependent. In particular, China produces most of the rare earth minerals that we need, but we often argue that's part of clean energy. But the process of getting them out of the ground is anything but clean. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of fossil fuels. It takes usually a lot of forced labor, and in particular, it's strip mining. They're called rare earth because they don't exist in like silver or gold. They don't exist in veins. So you've got to go through a lot of ground and sift through it and use all sorts of disastrous type of techniques to separate it from the soil. It is not very clean at all, but people just don't ever hear about that. They see the wind turbines, they see the solar panels, they think they're good for them. They're not.
Yeah, well, so let's separate a second the environment from the climate, which you sort of did in our first segment. These things are all bad for the environment. Are they going to impact the climate long term, or is the Earth big enough to handle it?
They may impact the climate, but I'm concerned that they may impact the biosphere faster. I mean, a lot of this produces pollution. The solutions that have to be used to get these rare earth minerals out of the soil creates all sorts of pollution locally, and they get into the rivers, they get into our groundwater system for drinking purposes. They create all sorts of local problems, both in China, in Africa, in places in South America, where the Chinese are working to get them out. It's just not a clean process, and a lot of people never hear about it, and most people don't want you to hear about it.
Well, it's a very successful process in transferring wealth from the Western developed countries to China and other nations. But as you point out, it may be riskier for the environment than the traditional use of fossil fuels, at least the way we do it in the United States, where we have restrictions on how we extract them and restrictions on how we use them. But what they're claiming is the big bad of all of this is carbon. And you're pointing out that these rare earth mineral processes may actually cause more harm to the environment.